Joining me now is the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee in the U.S. Senate, New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez. Senator, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
It seems as if the debate in Washington and New York is what should the president do? But is anybody asking the question of should the United States be doing anything? Do you think that that is a question that should be pondered?
Well, clearly it's a question. The reality is a couple of fold here. Number one is Prime Minister Maliki, as I called upon him privately last year when he was here and publicly afterwards, needs to stop his autocratic style and be all-inclusive in governing. Otherwise, this reality that is unfolding in Iraq will be a continuing one. And if anything's going to be done, it almost should be a conditioned precedent. Then the question is, what's the national security interest of the United States? ISIS is clearly, in my mind, not only desirous of creating a Shia covenant over Syria and Iraq, but they would like to attack the United States. We have to think about the consequences of having them be able to operate in the heart of the Middle East.
So it seems as if there's almost two separate issues here. On one hand, you're saying the United States has a national security interest to go after ISIS no matter what Maliki does. At the same time, and you also said there should be a condition placed if Maliki has to agree to certain conditions before the United States comes in. But can it be an either or? I mean, it sounds like you're making a simultaneous case. U.S. has a national security interest to try to stop and thwart ISIS. Full stop.
Well, look, yeah.
Then
well,
what
look.
do you do with Maliki?
Well, look, you know, the first goal would be to try to get Maliki to be all-inclusive. Air power doesn't end sectarian divide. Political leaders and prime ministers do. At the end of the day, if ISIS continues, then we'll have to, and succeeds, then we'll have to consider what is the threat to us. And I believe ISIS actually would clearly want to launch attacks against the United States. Whether it be successful or not would be a question, but that their desire to do so and the ability to launch from a place in which they could act with impunity is something that we have to consider in our national interests.
Do you believe partitioning is inevitable in Iraq?
I don't know if it's inevitable, but if Prime Minister Maliki survives this attack by ISIS and doesn't include Sunnis particularly and Kurds at the end of the day, then that may be the inevitable conclusion. You can't look as the leader of a country at every Sunni and ultimately think that they are a threat to you. If that is the case, then Sunnis will see no future in a country in which they are looked at as the person of suspect versus as a citizen of the state.
Do you believe we'd be in this situation with ISIS had the president gone ahead without Congress's approval and gone and done some limited airstrikes in Syria?
Well, remember that what our airstrikes would have been at the time were for the purposes of stopping Assad's ability to deliver chemical weapons against his own citizens. Whether that would have stopped ISIS is questionable. But I do think the lack of engagement by the entire world in Syria has allowed ISIS to build there and ultimately now march on Iraq, break a border. And Iran has been in the midst of creating the circumstances in which an ISIS now can actually be seen as a threat to them. And so, the reality is that had we engaged more robustly in Syria, as the Senate Foreign Relations Committee did in voting to arm vetted Syrian rebels, maybe we would be in a different position today.
And let me ask you this one final question with Iraq. Does the United States, regardless of what your view was of the Iraq war beforehand, the president's view was of the Iraq war, whether it should have happened or not, is there a Pottery Barn rule here where the United States government has a responsibility in dealing with Iraq in a way that it wouldn't with other countries?
Well, Chuck, as you may know, I voted against the war in Iraq when I was in the House of Representatives. Now the question is, what's in the national security interests of the United States? I would simply say that while I don't advocate bringing boots on the ground in order to stop the march of ISIS, the challenge is what is in our interest, what are the consequences to us, and in that regard, we have to both think about whether or not there is targeted and limited in duration strikes that may be able to change the tide. And also, I hope the administration is not thinking about engaging Iran. It was Iran that trained Shia militias in which many of our wounded warriors bear the scars of.
Oh, all right. Duly noted on that last point. No working with Iran that you're calling for there. Senator Menendez, I appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
Thank you.